So, lads, today we are just going to be talking. We are going to be talking about the WNBA. We're going to be talking about what happened with Caitlin Clark, what has happened with Paige Beckers, what has probably happened with other players, but they don't want to say it. But we are going to be talking about it's going to be a little bit of a weird video, a video I 100% don't want to make. Like you would like I don't think anyone would want to make this video, to be honest. But it is a situation where it's like the WNBA has to do something. And that comes down from the media to like the league itself. So obviously we all know about the situation with Caitlin Clark. We all know about the situation with Caitlin Clark and the Stalker. And like your man is just an unhinged person. Like he came like he was like, "Oh, I'm guilty as charged," was the first thing he said. And like he has to stay in Indiana for a while, and it's just a weird one. But obviously like this dude is completely crazy. The Paige Becker Stalker was completely crazy. And I think when it comes to the fans, the media, something needs to be done about this, because it's getting really, it's going to become a problem. Look, it is the reality of the situation, and it's awful when it comes to a lot of female celebrities and female athletes, that they will attract, again, crazy people. Like, obviously, does it have to get to a Monica Seles before the league does something about it? And what I mean by that is, there is no reason why the WNBA does not have a team in place to monitor social media. And I don't mean monitor every single post that's being said about a player. But like, there should be somebody where a player can go to the league and talk about a social media post, and the league can do something about that person. Like, again, I'm not going to mention their name, but the school SH00T or Caitlin Clark person who shows up and goes to fever games. Like, there's no, like, if a player reports like people like along those lines, the league should have enough balls to say, okay, unhinged social media post, this is worth banning people from showing up to games. Like, if a player doesn't feel comfortable, heck, there's players there's like people that are going to games have said some awful things. And obviously, when it comes to, like, when it goes too far, when it's something that even could be perceived as a threat. And then with the Caitlin Clark situation, obviously she went to the police, she went to her team. But there should be something in the league for that. Because when you're Caitlin Clark, you have the money to hire your own security. You have the ability to do all of this. But for a lot of players in the league, they don't. And then, so there should be something in the league to try help this. To honestly try, like, because you can guarantee Caitlin Clark is not the only person that's had to deal with this type of stuff. You can guarantee that Paige Becker is not the only person that's had to deal with this. Like, as somebody that's been on the internet, like, there are absolutely unhinged people always. And the league is just deciding to ignore it, and even ignoring it behind the scenes. This is not something that can be ignored. And honestly, it's something that shouldn't have been ignored. Just because Paige Beckers wasn't in the league, it shouldn't have been ignored when it happened to Paige. There needs to be something in place for at least for the league itself to start to work with the police to try find stuff like this, because this is something, as the league gets bigger, is only going to get more and more prevalent. And like, obviously, and then when it comes from the fans' perspective, like, there's ridiculous stuff where it's like, people genuinely believe, people are like, oh, see, Caitlin Clark, there's proof of this, and but Angel Reese said she was being stalked, but no, there's no actual proof. Does someone need to be literally arrested? These players are all getting unhinged stuff. We know that. Like, I'm sorry, I get unhinged messages from crazy people because I talk about the league. Of course, these players are too. Of course, so many of them are. Like, can you imagine how many unhinged messages the likes of an Angel Reese, an Angel Wilson, Brittany Griner, Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, all of these players, like, the amount of unhinged stuff they receive is probably crazy. And the WNBA should put money towards teams. And I've said this as well. Every team should have somebody who is in charge of the team's social media. And I don't mean that as in they read every message or anything, they stop things, but like somebody that's job is basically to hit the send button a lot of the times. to make sure that you don't say something that's going to put your team in trouble, to make sure you're not going to say something that's going to get yourself in trouble, to make sure you're not going to, and to be fair, with some of the unhinged stuff, to make sure you don't see it. Like a lot of high level athletes hire individuals to do it. As far as I'm aware, Caitlin Clark does. But the players, a lot of the time, their money hasn't reached their level of celebrity with a lot of WNBA players, especially the growth of the league. So the league needs to do something about it. They can't just brush everything under the rug until a Monica Seles situation happens, because it's just something that's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And then also when it comes to fans as well, like, if you are completely, like, as much as there's a difference between out of pocket dumb stuff and like unhinged crazy stuff like what happened to Caitlin Clark. The reality situation is that a lot of these top players are probably having to deal with stalkers like what happened with Caitlin Clark. The reason why the Caitlin Clark one got public is because the stalker actually showed up. The stalker was found in Indiana. Like, the reality is, if he had just been sending those unhinged stuff to Caitlin Clark on social media, and had never showed up to Indiana, or hadn't said that he was hadn't tweeted publicly that he was in Indiana, it probably mightn't have been found out. And obviously, look, there's nothing the league can do about unhinged people. But what they can do is, as I've always said all year, the league needs to put the players in the best position possible to make sure that, like, they don't have to deal with this stuff. Or have to deal with it as little as possible. So that at least if some things like this are happening, it can be to these other players, it can be reported to the league. If some stuff like this is happening to players, it's happening to more, you know it's happening to more than these players. We all know it's happening to more than these players. We can be as naive as we want. We can be as intentionally naive as we want, but it's happening to a lot more than just Caitlin Clark. It's happening to more than Adri. It's happening to more than Paige Beckers. Like, we have got to, like, the league has got to do something, because, again, as I've said, the individual players don't have the money a lot of them don't have the money to cover all of this stuff, whereas the league does. The league does, and at the end of the day, player safety matters a lot. And to be fair, player safety, the problem is that if this was any other player but Caitlin Clark, I think they might have done something. Player safety matters when it's not Caitlin Clark. And when it comes to the media as well. Like, it's protect all women until it's Caitlin Clark. Because if you've seen the amount of, like, unhinged people that are, like, I'm not going to say in WNBA media, but, like, are being interacted with positively by the media that are blaming Caitlin Clark for what happened. And it's like, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And, like, obviously there's extremes on every side towards all these players that are forgetting the players are people. But at the end of the day, like, we've got the media, we've got Jamel Hill basically saying, because Caitlin Clark doesn't come out publicly to complain about the stuff, nothing's happening. But the reality is, if you're being harassed, coming out publicly about it is probably one of the worst things you can do. Because if you come out publicly about it, a lot of times people end up getting even more unhinged. Like, can we stop? Like, the media needs to stop blaming, not even blaming the players, but it's like the media needs to stop with the narratives that only certain people are getting harassed, that crazy people only affect certain people, that crazy people are only in certain fan bases. There are crazy people everywhere. There are crazy people everywhere. There are crazy people in every part of the world. There are crazy people from every country. There are crazy people from every gender. There are crazy people everywhere. And again, the league needs to bump up on security. And, like, the fact is, we had media members calling Caitlin Clark soft for getting the fan, not even kicked out, by the way, getting the fan talked to at the Connecticut Sun game. That fan was just talked to by security. That fan supposedly was saying stuff about her mother, was calling her every name under the sun. And that fan still got to go back to the seat. How is Caitlin Clark meant to know? Because we know that this whole stalker situation has been happening for months. How is she meant to know that that dude giving her abuse going courtside wasn't a stalker? He's probably been tweeting at her saying that she was going to go to her games right at courtside. How is she meant to know that? But yet we've got some media members then talking about that situation, like, oh, Caitlin Clark is soft. Like, oh, she shouldn't have done anything. How is she meant to know? The reality is that the league needs to put more money into the safety of their players, because they don't seem to care. Like, in the end, the WNBPA, this should be one of the things they're pushing for the most. Like, they're pushing to abolish the draft because, we don't really want, like, players to have to go to certain situations for the draft. They're pushing to abolish the draft. They're pushing to, demand that she says something. Kathy Engelbert basically decides, you know what, this racist, like the racism narrative is not stopping. I don't want to talk about this, so I'm going to talk about the good things in the WNBA. And they demanded Kathy Engelbert apologize. This is all the Players Association cares about. The Players Association don't care about their players, because this should be one of the main things they're pushing for. Because the reality of the situation is that this is the safety of the players is the most important thing. And with this increased celebrity of WNBA players, especially like players that are just adjacent on teams, like for example, someone like a Lexi Hull in a lot of situations is a celebrity. It's a non-0% chance that there's a freaking stalker for Lexi Hull. She's not making the money to protect herself from all that. So the league needs to do something about that. The WNBPA should be pushing for it, but the reality is that whether it be the league, whether it be the media, heck, whether it be the Players Association, they're all pro player, but they're not going to make a pro player decision when it's based on something that's happened to Caitlin Clark. They're all about mental health, except when it's her. Even though the reality of the situation is that yes, right now this situation happened to Caitlin Clark, but it's going to keep happening and it's going to keep getting worse. And the league needs to do something, because a Monica Seles situation could happen. Because the security's not good enough in the league. There's not enough like individual protection when it comes to a lot of stuff on social media. Because obviously, yeah, social media hate posts are one thing. There's bad posts on social media all the time. But like the fact that, again, players aren't, like Caitlin Clark didn't even go to the league. It was just the Pacers organization. So it's like you've got now a situation where Caitlin Clark had the facilities to at least go somewhere. There are players that don't. And if the WNBA, whether it be the Players Association pushing for it or the league itself, don't do anything, there's going to be a freaking unhinged person somewhere. And we can pretend like it doesn't exist. We can pretend that this is a one-off situation. We can pretend that this is a Caitlin Clark situation. You can go and start blaming whoever the hell you want for this. But it's never an individual person's fault for a crazy person. But the league needs to do as much as they can to keep crazy people away from these players. And right now, not only are they not doing everything they can, they're literally doing nothing. So anyway, I'll see you guys.